Hey guys, welcome to the 2021 season. I wanted to make this video about referees as a reference for our referees, but not just them, our players too. I think it's important for people to understand how we think about and how we approach refereeing, and we're always open to thoughts and suggestions of how to best do it. I'm going to end this video with our top 7 philosophies about how we think about refereeing, and it really shapes the way that we approach it. So I think it's important for, if you care about how we think about it, how we approach it, how we prioritize within refereeing, then you watch till the end to see that. It's relevant so you know how I think about it, but also it's a characteristic that we look for in other referees as well, especially when they get to the higher ranking positions where they're making a lot of quick decisions, but also important decisions, and act as kind of the backup for some of the people still learning the beginning basics of refereeing. When I first started CrossFit, regionals had just become a thing and it was a lot easier. So it was actually fairly competitive. So I worked out a lot with some of the higher performers, not just in my gym, but in the area as well. And it led me to kind of realize certain types of CrossFitters that had an impact on how I felt about them. Mainly I'm referring to cheaters, to people that will short reps on purpose and claim to have a performance that's actually better than what they did because they either shorted reps or clearly didn't meet points of performance. And that happens a lot, but I think where it affects me the most is when people want to present themselves as winners of a workout and even will kind of talk smack or puff their chest out a little bit when they clearly shorted reps, or they didn't do all of them, or they shorted specific standards. And in that specific case, it honestly, it starts to affect how I think about that person. And if it's a friend, it kind of erodes the friendship away. And I think the reason for that, and I've thought about this a lot, is just the concept to me of puffing your chest out or positioning yourself as a winner when you know deep down psychologically that you didn't do the same workout as the person you're claiming to have beaten. That conflicts with me on a very deep level, and it makes me feel like that person just cares so much about the outward presence of being a winner that they're willing to sacrifice their own integrity to position themselves that way, because in reality they're not a winner. There's somebody who wants to be seen as a winner and is willing to sacrifice their personal integrity to do that. And that's a dramatic statement. I get that. Maybe that's over the top, but that's how I feel about it personally. And I think that's important to portray, because I think that's consistent in some of the other people that have elevated and risen to the top in the grid refereeing community that we've worked on building. Integrity, fairness is a passion. It's like deep ingrained in who we are, and it's something that the decisions that you make on the grid that affect the performance are seated and rooted in that passion for integrity and fairness. And that's important for the referees to know that that's how we think and how we look, but it's also important for the players to know that that's how I feel about the integrity of the fairness of the game, not because it's the right business decision, but it's just rooted in who I am as a person. And it has been for years, and I feel like it always has been. And I'm not here to judge anyone if they don't feel that way in any sense of the word. It's just how I am. And there's a lot of people that are great at what they do that have different kind of priorities when it comes to what's ingrained in them. But I think the point in communicating that is that these are some of the deep-seated priorities that tend to rise up, and things that we are attracted to when we're looking for people that are in a leadership position with refereeing and just in our organization in general. So there's a bit of coaching that we try and give the referees that corresponds a little bit about this passion for integrity and for fairness within a given sport. And that is to attach a little bit of emotion around your position. So, for example, when somebody is performing a rep and they clearly don't hit the standard, as a referee, we want to treat that a little bit like they're trying to get one past us. It's not like we don't care if they intended to or not. We don't have time to make that assessment. It's not about that. It's about this person is trying to do something in my domain that is against what I'm here to stop. And I need to have that not on my watch type of position mentally and emotionally, so that there's a little bit of passion behind making that call. And there's a few reasons for that. One is it helps make the call a little bit more dramatic and decisive, but also it engages the subconscious. And there's a bunch of books out there that talk about how your subconscious can make decisions quicker than your conscious decision making. And so if you can engage your emotion a little bit in making that decision, your subconscious is more involved and can help make that decision quicker. So if you have that feeling like this person is trying to get one over on me, I know it sounds funny, but you also have to have the opposite of that when they actually do perform a good rep. You want to be excited about seeing those standards performed as they should be, and almost gleefully accept and acknowledge that rep, because that means that our job is being done and we're all working together as players, as teams, as referees, and building the integrity of the sport together. And again, it sounds dramatic, but if we can attach a little bit of emotion to both sides of calling a fault and calling a good rep, then it's going to make it more decisive, and it's also going to make that decision quicker and make for a more cohesive experience for everybody that's involved. Okay, so this is a great segue into the experience of being a referee. And where we get into trouble when people start talking about it is when they compare it to CrossFit. And it's easy to do because a lot of us come from CrossFit. A lot of our referees have a CrossFit background. A lot of players have a CrossFit background. But the reality is they're so different. They're not in any way similar. And when you make that attachment, it undermines how difficult it is to be a grid referee, but also the actual skill sets that it takes to be an effective referee. So we've had plenty of really quality CrossFit refs come over and try grid refereeing, and they, quite frankly, didn't cut the mustard. They couldn't keep up with the pace. They couldn't keep in the back of their mind the rules of the race that are actually more important than the rep that's happening in front of them at any given time. And I'll get into why in a minute, but it's important to recognize that the speed is dramatically different. The format is dramatically different. The switching in and out is dramatically different. So it takes a very different person to be a good grid referee than it does for somebody to be a good CrossFit referee. There is crossover. So, for example, you need to be able to make that hard decision, make that hard call, and be authoritative in making that call. And that goes for both situations. But when it comes to being able to make quick decision making, it matters a lot more in grid than in CrossFit. And every single rep matters a lot more in grid than in CrossFit. So you can get away with missing a rep or two in CrossFit and still be considered a really good referee for the most part. You can't do that in grid. And it's going to happen from time to time because we're all human and whatnot. But if it happens consistently over a longer period of time, then it's just not going to work. So those are the kinds of differentiations I think are important in comparing CrossFit to grid. But, grid is very difficult, and I think it's important for people to understand that. And there was actually a time in this, building of the Florida Grid League where I questioned whether it was possible to have the level of refereeing needed to have an enjoyable experience on the grid. And it was because there was always a lot of questioning and conflict about specific reps and calls that were made. And I think what I came to realize in thinking about that and processing it, because there was so much high intensity and conflict, especially early on, is that the best sports in the world have just as much subjectivity when it comes to what a good and bad rep is. So, for example, Baseball is a great one. Balls and strikes. If you watch a baseball game, if you're passionate about a baseball game, you cannot get through a baseball game without questioning a ball or a strike. It's part of the game. The same thing with reps on the grid. People are going as fast as they can. You're in real time. You have 0.2 seconds on average to make a call. Those kinds of decisions are going to be highly subjective a lot of the time. You're talking about millimeters of an inch oftentimes to determine whether or not something was a good rep. So another good example is basketball. A foul. A foul is very subjective. In the NFL, most of the calls are subjective. A holding call, a pass interference call, as two quick examples. There's always debate about whether or not those are legit, and probably half of them are accepted as a good calls just right off the bat, but so many of them are debated. And in those sports and in those leagues with millions of dollars spent in making sure that the referee staff is in the best position that they possibly can be to make those calls, with training, with practice, with pay, with rewarding the best ones, there is still always controversy, especially in the NFL. You know, not too long ago, the Saints should have gone on to the Super Bowl, but they didn't because of a single call that was made, and they changed the rules because of it. But it was a mistake. I think it's important to recognize that the best sports in the world have this subjectivity about them, and I think there's a reason for that, and it is that the intensity, the excitement, and everything that is required to have those experiences in association with a sport require a level of subjectivity. So we need to, expect that that is the case. It doesn't mean that it takes any significance or importance off of us making the right call in the individual instance, and I'm not taking any responsibility off of that. But I'm just saying that if we can all think about this in a similar way and understand that there's a bit of subjectivity that's going to be involved with our sport, we're just going to have a better experience overall. And that goes for fans, players, referees not being so hard on themselves and not getting to the point where they can't handle the pressure they put on themselves, which has happened, by the way, to make the right call, because it's just not possible to have a definitive answer every single time on the grid in real time. It's impossible. It's inhuman. So it doesn't, again, I've demonstrated how we think about it. I've demonstrated how important it is to us to create a fair and level experience. But that doesn't mean it's an easy thing, and we all need to be on the same level about how realistic it is to have a definitive answer in hundreds, if not thousands, of reps on the grid in any given match. So real quick, let's talk about our process for a new referee. I think it's important for everybody to understand that there is a process that we've put in place. And the goal of the process is to help those that have the qualities that we're looking for rise to the top and put them in better position to make the right call, and those that aren't there yet to be in training and learn what they need to get to that point. And then there is going to be a certain percentage of people that would like to be a ref that just aren't a good fit. And there's oftentimes places for them in some role, such as recording the time or being a start or finish line ref. But that's not always the case, and there's nothing wrong with it. It takes a special skill set, just like not everybody is an artist and not everybody is a singer, not everybody can be a grid referee. So the process starts with an online training course, and anybody can take this that's watching this at any time. If you're a player, you can take it for free. You just shoot us a message and we give you a code that you can then go and take the referee course just to see what it's like. Once you get through the in-training course, you need to have a certain score to get past it, and once you get that score, the next step is an in-person training. And in-person training is required for all of our referees to be calling good or bad reps on the grid. Most of the time, anybody that's calling reps on the grid has started as a start line or a finish line referee or a timing referee. The pressure is a lot less, but you're still involved in the process. So you see how the communication works, You see the action on the grid and how the calls are made, the positions that the referees are. All of these are really important to doing the best job that we possibly can. It's a great exposure and experience to build up that awareness as well as skill set to get to the point where you're in decision-making positions in short amounts of time on the grid itself. Once you get to that higher level referee position, you are asked to make a lot more decisions. You're also asked to spend a lot more time. And the reason for that is we are constantly questioning what we do. This is really important for players to know, is we don't just set things and go and run. We're always iterating. We're always thinking, how can we be doing this better? As the rules of the sport and the races change, as we grow up and we're able to allocate more resources, as the quality of referee increases, the situation changes. So we're constantly questioning, okay, where is a better position? Do we need a backup ref in this case to oversee the calls that are being made? How can we ensure that the best call is being made from the start to the finish without any questioning in between or possibility for error? So all of these questions are constantly being asked in the off season, prior to a match, after a match, and we do have film watching as well. I watch a lot of film when it comes to seeing what mistakes we made, what things we did well, and pulling out good examples for people to understand certain nuances about the refereeing experience that will be helpful from watching film. We have other top-level referees that do the same thing. So there is, after the fact, assessment, improvement, and then communication about how we can all be on the same page. So from start to finish, starting with the referee training course to progressing up the ladder into a better and better or higher and higher position as a referee, and then watching film, iterating, assessing, and progressing in getting better at the position is kind of the process that we are always looking to uphold for all of our referees. All right, so let's talk about our 7 top philosophies for how we think about and how we shape refereeing for this sport. I'm going to start with our oath, and our oath was meticulously thought over in how we want to position the tone that we set at the beginning of every match. And we say this oath as a group amongst our referees. So it is, I hereby pledge upon my character as a man or woman to uphold the rules and standards set forth for this match. I will do so at the absolute best of my ability without bias of any sort. I will respect and support the players, the coaches, and my fellow referees. I will remain focused in the face of outside influence. I will honor my position to uphold the integrity of this match and the sport of grid. May the best team win. And it's a great tone setter for how we think and how we get into the mental outlook of this match. And we kind of say, okay, when we say this oath, we don't know anybody on the grid. We don't know who they are. It doesn't matter who they are. They're all just parts of this bigger operation that we're going to put on this amazing grid match. It doesn't matter who does what. It doesn't matter what is said. It doesn't matter the emotional reactions that happen. It's all wiped clean. We focus on our job. We know what we do. Every decision we make, everything we think about comes back to how can we make this the most even, most fair. And it's really a quest. It's a mission. It's a deep-seated, almost like it sounds crazy, but to get into this mind frame that it's like a quest. Like it's beyond ourselves. We are upholding the integrity of the sport of grid. And so that oath is really meant to get us into that mind frame, which I think sets us up emotionally and mentally to push out all of the distractions, push out anything like angry players or coaches or questions that happen or mistakes that are made. Take all of that emotion out of it. And I talked about where we think emotion is helpful in decision making, but it's also important to take emotion out of our experience on the grid and have one singular focus, and that is that when we are on the grid, we are creating this experience that is unlike any other in the world, and it's our job to uphold that integrity, and we just got to be proud and focused on doing that. Okay, so that is, the tone setting, probably the most important of our 7 philosophies. But here's the next most important, and that is our priorities in decision making at any given moment on the grid go in this order: race rules, rep count, then movement standards. The reason we say that is when we're getting ready to ref a specific race, these are the kind of priorities we put in our mind of, okay, let me look at the race rules. Let me, look for the common things that happen in association to those race rules. Once I feel really confident about that, then I look at the rep counts. And I look at the rep counts before every set that I do and blaze that into my brain so there's no chance I get that rep count wrong. And the reason is because those two things, the race rules and the rep counts, have a much bigger impact in the flow of the race when there is a mistake. So if somebody is mistaken about how a race rule works, or more commonly forgets an element of the race rule, and I'll give you an example where somebody in the echo is focused on their player and not on the previous player at all, and they only begin the rep count and they only think about beginning the rep count when their player begins moving. But the reality is that's not what the case should be, because their player may start moving before the previous set is over, and we can't start counting until the previous set is over. So remembering those little nuances within a race are the number one priority, because if we count 20 reps that didn't actually count, that's going to have a huge impact in that player's performance, and if it's not caught, that clearly is going to have a huge impact in the race overall. So those kinds of mistakes happen less and less and less and less as we go, because we've done a good job of prioritizing them and drilling them into the referee's head. But that's why. So race rules, rep count, which again, if we screw up a rep count, that has a much bigger impact than any individual rep, and then movement standards. And there's only 3 things that we have to think about before a race, but that's how we kind of prioritize and think about it, because movement standards are really important, but one rep where we miss a rep standard has a lot less impact than the rep count or the race rules. Okay, the next philosophy: if you're not sure, it's a fault. And the reason we think about things this way is if we want it to be a very easy decision. So we don't have time to dwell. We don't have time to say, well, was that a good rep? Was it a bad rep? I think it was. I'm not sure. We're going to get the call right more often than not if we say, if you're not sure, it's a fault. And it also, I think this is important for players to know too, because it puts significance on, making it very obvious that making it easy for us to be sure. Because if you're riding that line, more often than not, and this is proven in film, more often than not, you're going to lose some reps. Even if it's because of ambiguity, you're going to lose some reps in that count and negate any advantage that you would get by riding that line. And the best grid players in the world are able to move incredibly fast while making very distinguished and finite movement endpoints, and make our jobs as referees easy and create that, yes, that was a good rep, I'm excited about it feeling within a referee, and then they can count that rep good, and everybody moves on, and there's no questioning whatsoever. So that's an important thing. If you aren't sure, it's a fault. The next philosophy is fault first, cue second. So the number one priority is faulting when it needs to be done. And then if there is time, and there's not always time, if there is time, then we cue. And we look for one-word cues. So we look for the word that's going to have the most impact in reference for that player to know what was wrong. So for example, if your hips aren't opening, we say hips. If your depth isn't going long enough, we say depth. Looking for those one-word quick cues if we have time. Now, a good example is chest to bar. Those reps are happening so fast, we don't have time to tell you what the cue is, and the chances are you already know anyway. There's only 2 different things it could be. But especially on a waterfall, such as toe to bar or chest to bar, or even bar muscle ups, because you cut the rep time in half, you don't really have time to say, fault your chest didn't touch or fault your arms didn't reach extension. most of the time you're going to have to figure that out as your player. And if you aren't sure, you're just going to have to accentuate those movements because something didn't meet that standard. And most of the time you're going to know. Most of the time you're going to know what it is. There are going to be instances where you're moving fast, you weren't sure exactly where you didn't hit it, but just look to accentuate if that's the case, if we don't have time to say. So fault first, cue second, and then this leads into our next philosophy, which is cue where possible, but only without influencing your ability to assess and communicate. So we want to give the athletes the players and the coaches, the best position to be successful. That means if we can cue, we will cue, but not in a way that's going to sacrifice our ability to keep the rep count effectively or to assess and communicate the rep count and the standard being done at that given time. So it's very dependent on the situation. It's very dependent on the movement that's being performed. But that's how we think. We want to put you guys as players and as coaches in the best position to do your job and have fun. And that means that if we can communicate, we're going to, including when a rule is being violated or about to be violated, such as somebody being on the grid about to cross a line or something like that. But also, if a rep is being performed and the player isn't sure, cueing them. Okay, so this one is about something to strive for as a referee, and it takes time and practice. There's just no way to be this way when you first start, or at least it's really, really difficult in my personal experience and everybody that we've seen come up as a referee, and that is to strive for decisiveness. And part of that comes from, building emotion into your calling of an individual rep, like we talked about earlier. But anytime that you can be loud and decisive in your call, you're putting everybody around you in a better position to be successful. That's the players, that's the other referees on the grid, that's the coach. And so strive for quick decision making, decisiveness, and once that decision's made, move on. Don't think about it for another split second because the next rep is just as important. And any dwelling you have on that previous rep is only going to influence your ability moving forward. So once the decision's made, forget about it. And then if you're in a position as a lane chief or somebody that is there to back up a situation, and you notice a mistake that's made, make a mental inventory of it. But again, move on, get to the next rep. And then at the end of the race is the time to bring something up that happened on the race, if necessary, to assess whether or not it affected the outcome of the race and needs something like a race run. So strive for decisiveness. Once that decisive decision's made, move on, get to the next decision, and that's how we go all the way down the sequence of all the reps in the race and the end of the race. All right, the last one, right, not easy. And that's a philosophy to think about of when you're making decisions, make the right decision, not the easy decision. That sounds intuitive, but when you have all of this pressure on you at any given time, and coaches and players that will jump on you about a decision that's made, it becomes very easy to make the easy decision. And I'll give you an example. An easy decision is one that nobody saw. There was a mistake that's made, nobody saw it, let's just let it go. That's the easy decision. It's not the right decision. And again, when there's all this pressure, and unless you've been through that pressure, it's really hard to quantify how difficult it can be to resist the desire to take the easy route because you don't want to stir the pot. You don't want to have somebody be upset with a mistake that's made or have to go through a process which involves emotional coaches and players to determine what happened. That's not fun. That's the hard part of our job. So it takes a level of discipline to ensure that we're always prioritizing the right, not the easy. And so if you've worked with me on the grid for any period of time, you've known that I will see things that nobody else has seen because of my position, my experience, whatever it is. And the easy thing to do in that situation is not bring it up. But I will, because we always prioritize the right decision. That means that the experience is what it should be, the most fair situation, and that means the right, not the easy. So to kind of summarize this whole thing up, there are a lot of other things that we talk about on a team level, as far as things like we don't bring up an issue with a race unless it clearly affected the outcome of the race. This is designed to keep the flow of the race, the integrity of the sport continued without bringing up every little detail that comes up, when it doesn't affect the outcome of the race. Because, we talked about subjectivity. Subjectivity happens on both sides of the grid. Another thing we do to address subjectivity and just difference in personalities, we're always rotating the referees in all the different positions. So you're never going to get the same referees in the same times. These are things that have been developed over time that assess our best ability, given the nature of the sport, to do the best job that we can. And there's a whole long list of those that I won't go into right now, but your coaches are familiar with them because we talk about them in the team levels, about how we make decisions regarding how things should be rerun, when they should be rerun, all those types of things. And all of this is in the referee handbook, which if you're watching this, you have access to. And if you don't know where it is and you want to see it, just shoot us an email. But it's the referee handbook, which again addresses all the different hand signals, all the different rules that we have to enforce, and the philosophies, like when things are rerun and how they're rerun. So if you're interested, take a look. But this has been a long video, and if you made it this far, I really appreciate that. It actually means a lot because it means you have a passion to understand how the sport is run. We're always open to suggestion if you have one. We have implemented many player suggestions in the past, player and coach suggestions, and we will continue to do so when we assess the situation and say that can improve our quality of refereeing. And most of them are turned down because it does take a level of understanding of our current process that, quite frankly, most people don't have time to understand. Like, just watching this video alone, most people will have clicked off at some point because we don't have time these days. But if you made it this far, then that means a lot. And you are somebody that I would really listen to when it comes to having a suggestion about how we can be better referees. So again, thank you for your time. Thank you for being a part of the league. And I look forward to hearing from you if you have thoughts or suggestions about anything that's said here or any experience that you have on the grid. Thank you.